Hello and welcome to episode 277 of Stand Up. Joining me today is Professor Eric Segall, who is a constitutional law professor at Georgia State University, the author of 2 books about the Supreme Court, and one of your all-time favorite guests. I'm Pete Dominick. Time to stand up with me right now. Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to this daily podcast. Thank you very much for joining me, for supporting me, and for telling your friends about this show and the community that we have created with it. Normally, I do a big, robust news segment, have a lot of fun learning about what happened in the last day or so. But this week, I'm taking more time off, and usually I also have 2 guests, but I'm just putting out 1 guest a day. A lot of people have responded and said, why don't you take the whole week off? Lots of podcasts take the whole week off. You should take the week off. I don't want you to get burned out. We love what you're doing, but we don't want you to get burned out. Don't worry, Pete. We'll be here when you come back. I hear you. I appreciate it, but I thoroughly love doing this, and I can't stop completely. And even if I do take the entire week off, I'd still probably put up 5 new conversations and post them ahead of time. I'm posting one every day. I'm having a conversation and posting it. It's not too much work. It's a few hours of work, and I love doing it, and I love having these conversations. And today's conversation with Eric Segall is really special. We talked about a bunch of different issues and subjects relating to the court and politics and where we're at in America. We talked a lot about religion and racism. I got sanctimonious and talked over him as usual. At the very end, though, and it's a long conversation, almost 2 hours. I'll understand if you don't get to listen to the whole thing, but I do want to tell you at the end, he really put me in my place in such a thoughtful way. He said I should have more humility about such discussions regarding religion. And he said it in such a constructive and respectful way that I really heard it and thought he was profoundly accurate. It was great constructive criticism for me. So if you do listen to our conversation, you hear me get a little fired up and riled up about some of the issues regarding race and religion, I think it's super helpful what he said to me at the end. I try to learn and grow each day on this podcast and in these conversations with these brilliant people, as well as with you. And I think that's what I did during this conversation, especially at the end when Professor Segall gave me some great advice, and I hope that we can all learn from this conversation. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you'll consider a subscription because this podcast, while free, is not cheap. I put a lot into it. It's daily, and I'd like to keep growing it. So thank you for your support. Thank you for tuning in. And here now is the Ashe Family Chair, Professor of Law at Georgia State University College of Law. He got his bachelor's at Emory University. He got his legal degree at Vanderbilt University. Graduated with honors. He was the research editor for the Law Review, member of the Order of the Coif, whatever the hell that is. He clerked for Chief Judge Charles Moye Jr. in the Northern District of Georgia, and the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals with Judge Albert Henderson. You want his whole bio? He teaches federal courts and constitutional law. He is the author of Originalism as Faith and Supreme Myths, Why the Supreme Court is Not a Court and Its Justices Are Not Judges, a view that was far more radical when we first started talking than it is now. His op-eds and essays have appeared in the New York Times, LA Times, The Atlantic, Vox, Salon, The Daily Beast, among others. He's appeared on CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and all of Atlanta's local news stations. And he hosts his own podcast now called Supreme Myths. He tweets at @eSpinSegall. All this is in the show notes for today's episode, as is every episode. Here now, Eric Segall. All right, the Legal Eagle, Eric Segall, joins me now. Lots to talk about. How are you? Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm fine. I apologize to the world for writing a depressing blog post today, but I feel like it's my job to do that.
We will get to your depressing blog post, which everybody can find at Dorf on Law. We're going to talk about your latest episode of your podcast, maybe even some of your most recent episodes of your podcast, which is called Supreme Myths. How's that going, by the way? You enjoying hosting these conversations?
Well, I didn't know we were going to go there because this is going to sound even more egocentric, but so I'm actually really conflicted about it. And then something happened today that I don't know. I enjoy doing it, Pete, because I love talking to people who I really respect and think are really smart and disagree with me. A good half of them are people who really disagree with me. So that's fun. Like I had a priest on who's very conservative, and people love that because we had a really civil, respectful conversation. We disagreed on everything. but we had a really civil, respectful.
Who was that? I haven't heard that one. I got to listen to that.
His name is Father Bill Daly. He's a former. He went to Columbia Law School. He's at Notre Dame, and he's a good guy. We disagree on everything, but we have a mutual respect. I have that with a lot of these people, and that's really important to me. I mean, so I have a lot of originalists on, and we debate. The reason I started this, Pete, was for that reason. This was, over the summer, COVID's going on. Everybody hates each other, and it's all red and blue. And I know in my little teeny part of the world, I wanted to show that people know I have strong views. People know I'm progressive. People know all this. I wanted to have people on who I could disagree with in a way that's like a good tennis match or a good one-on-one basketball game. Really, we really exchange ideas, and we even sometimes get a little emotional, but it's always with an underlying respect and civility. And you know me, that's been my agenda for a long time. And I really like doing that. So that's one hand. The other hand is it feels really egocentric. It feels really like, why am I doing this? Segall, Georgia State Law. And it just feels like, why do I get to have this venue in this podcast, and why isn't someone else doing it? But then I get emails like I got today, and I've gotten like 10 of these from people who are on the actual podcast. I often say I may stop doing this, not because I don't like it, but I just feel self-conscious. It doesn't feel right. And I've gotten a bunch of emails saying, don't stop doing this. This is from a lawyer in Louisiana. I don't know. I've never met, a lot of the people are like, come to me, Pete, honestly, come to me through you. Not on the academic side, but, on the social media side. I wouldn't be me right now in my life if it wasn't for you. But now I'm getting things from people who are not coming from you. That is, people who are discovering me on iTunes or Google Play or Spotify or whatever. So that makes me feel good, but it still feels egotistical. So I don't know. I'm torn about it.
I'm not sure why it feels egotistical. I mean, the idea, the way I see it is that a podcast or any type of chat show, video, whatever you want, YouTube, allows for you to tape and share a conversation. And it also allows for you to have conversations with people that you'd really like to have these conversations with, or in your case, often debates and constitutional legal arguments. And whatever happens from that point on, if 1 million people or 1,000 people listen, who cares? It allows you that opportunity, and the guest that you're having is almost always happy to do it, and that's all that matters. I'm not sure why you're. So
it's not that let me tell you what it's not. I don't care if 10 people listen or 10,000 people. I mean, I care a little, but that's not what's driving my indecision. It's not that. It's more, who am I to think that people really are going to care about? This guy said he's a big fan. That's still, I don't know how to process that.
Oh,
like you wanted fans. Like in your career, you needed fans. I never thought that would be a thing like that. I'm being really honest.
Yeah,
I know this sounds naive, but I don't fans. Like, I'm a law professor. I don't have fans. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, the only really difference is that certain people don't set out to do any kind of work where the people who enjoy the work would refer to themselves as fans. But it's no different than necessarily than students. It's just people listening to you for a long time, and then finally, gaining access, making contact with you. Don't overthink it.
I guess
it's cool, but
right,
I like it. I think it's fine. I think it's great, and I think that you're educating people. It's not like they're a fan of your
my movie reviews.
Yeah, something that. But again, if they were, that'd be fine too. As long whatever relieves the suffering distracts you from.
Well, thank you for that. I don't know. It's
I think it's awesome. And on the podcast this week, later on this week, it'll drop. You have an NYU professor named Chris Sprigman, is it?
Yeah, he's actually a great guy, by the way. There are like 7 great. I won't say it that way. Out of every 10 law professors, like 7 are not great guys. He's a really good guy. He lives in Brooklyn. He's a really good guy, and next to you, he has probably done maybe the most for my career because 5 years, this is going to sound terrible, but 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I was really thinking I'm going to hang it up about the Supreme Court not being a court. Like I was going to still write about original, but I was going to give that part of it up because I wasn't making a lot of progress.
Stop beating that drum.
I was going to stop.
The court is not a court.
Yeah, and I never met him. He called me out of the blue. Like he emailed me and said, "Can you call me? I'm Chris Brigman. I'm at NYU. We've never met, but I want to talk to you." I said, "Sure." And he could not have been nicer. So he's like 15 years younger than me, but he's at NYU, top 5 law school. He's an elite guy. And he couldn't have been nicer about how my work has affected him.
That's so great to hear.
And he encouraged me not to stop beating the drum.
That's great.
And now he just came out with an article in NYU in January about how Congress, I don't want to get into it too much tonight because it's his article and all that, but how Congress can take away the court's jurisdiction, which I believe they can also, and we can weaken the court that way. I'm always in favor of weakening the court. And his article, if you read that article, you'd be, God, this sounds a little bit like Segall. So that conversation like re-energized me a little bit.
That's
I have to say. Yeah. So, and in fact, when I introduced him today, I said most of the people on Supreme Myths don't share, even liberals and progressives like Mike Dorff don't share my views on the court not being a court. This is the first guest who kind of does. And that's like, anyway. So.
I bring him up because you were telling me that in the discussion that you had with him, this NYU law professor, talked about how other countries in the world see our court, its influence, its power, and they don't
understand it. They don't understand it.
What do you mean? I thought that was a really fascinating thing, and I'm excited to hear the conversation.
So let's put it in context. The blog post I wrote today is a prediction of what the court's going to do for the next, 10 to 20 years. 1 to 20 years. And if the court personnel doesn't change, if you're a progressive, you're going to be really sad because on affirmative action, abortion, campaign finance reform, guns, the court's going to be very conservative for a very long time and have serious influence on America in a conservative way. And we were talking about, and he was saying that, for example, in Canada, Germany, and South Africa, they all have written constitutions that are really nice, talk about equality and rights and all that stuff. But in all of those cases, they have ways of overturning court decisions or not following court decisions that make it much more of a conversation, a dialogue. So in Canada, if 2/3 of the parliament disagree with a Supreme Court of Canada decision overturning a law, if 2/3 agree, they can reverse what the Supreme Court does. And even though that very rarely happens, the fact that it can happen gives more humility to the Canadian Supreme Court. Same thing in South Africa, same thing in Germany. There's no other country that has a 180-year tradition of judges doing things like in 1857 saying Congress can't abolish slavery in the territories, or like Citizens United. We were talking about how our campaign finance reform, our campaign finance laws are so out of whack with the rest of the free world. Yeah. Like Canada, England, France, Spain, Germany all have free speech. Like there's free speech in all of those countries, but they limit corporate influence on elections and billionaire influence on elections in ways that our liberal justices, Kagan, Sotomayor, wouldn't allow. And they don't understand how these judges can have so much power. They just don't understand it.
I wonder if, by the way, the difference in, one of the limits you mentioned is that they're not allowed, for example, in Canada, that there's no political advertisements allowed, I think, on TV.
England.
In England, is it?
Yeah, it's England. Yeah.
For a certain amount of time before the election, which is a limit on a certain type of speech.
Right.
And I wonder if, because of how much influence the private sector, especially corporations and individuals with a lot of money, have on our laws in America, I wonder if that's why we have so much kind of corruption and so much unfairness in that we try to monetize every industry and privatize every industry and get the government, which creates certain sense of fairness and rules, out of every industry. And that's why we don't have universal health care. That's why we don't have, things that would benefit the public, universal pre-K, affordable college. To live in America is so difficult and challenging and expensive for so many people. government is supposed to make that a little bit more fair. There's supposed to be laws that make it more fair, but really we're more of an oligarchy or a plutocracy. And I have to wonder if that's because of how much influence big money and interests, corporations, industries, and individuals have on our lawmaking versus Canada, UK, Australia, and other even non-English speaking countries, Israel, Japan.
Right. On the legislative side, I think that absolutely explains Congress, Pete, which you know as much about as I do. I think you've actually made a great description of why we have such a hard time getting progressive things done in this country.
What's in the public's interest? What's in the public's interest?
But so let me remind everybody listening that from 1900 to 1936, the Supreme Court struck down, people fight over the number, but let's say somewhere between 150 and 200 laws, state and federal, in 36 years about worker safety, unions, overtime laws. It wasn't until FDR, threatened to pack the court and some of the justices died and retired that we were even allowed to have like minimum wage laws. I think that 1900 to 1936 period is an example of both things. It's an example of what you're talking about. To those judges, it was insane to think the government can tell an employer what wages they can or can't pay to their employee. To them, that was a thing. But so that's your point. My point and Chris's point would be, in no other country in the world would judges have the power to do that. Like, they stopped progressive legislation for 30 years. They didn't strike down everything, but they really stopped the movement. Congress tried to abolish child labor, and the Supreme Court overturned that. And this is between 1910 and 1920. And the Supreme Court said, no, you can't end child labor. You can't. They ruled unconstitutional the law that Congress passed.
Right.
And there's two things about that. One is your point, that those justices had a view of the government and the private sector that you and I don't agree with. People in France and Spain and England and Canada don't agree with, but somehow America does in this John Wayne free enterprise mentality. But the second point is, in no other country would judges have the power to do that. I mean, there was a huge movement in Congress to help children working in factories and mines, and the court said no. So, I mean, that's replicated itself over and over. And Chris's point today on the podcast, my podcast, was they don't understand why we would give unelected life tenure judges that power. Like, it's one thing to say, give us your opinion, and we'll take it for what it's worth. That's kind of how it works in other countries. We're interested in your opinion because you're smart judges, but at the end of the day, it's the people or the legislature or the parliament that gets to decide. And of course, that's how it should be. So Chris's whole point about this is American, and you and I have been talking about this now for years.
Yeah.
America needs more democracy across the board. More democracy. The Senate is not democratic. The Supreme Court is not democratic. We have a government run by elites, and we need fundamental change. And there's two things, at least three things that have to change: the Electoral College, the Senate, and the power the Supreme Court has. And they're all related.
All right, well, let's talk about all of them. We've talked about them before in different ways and different times, obviously, but obviously I think the most relevant and urgent issue is to talk about the United States Senate and the filibuster and what that is. And I think no matter how many times I hear about it, I feel like I still need it explained to me again, and it makes me feel dumb. And then I saw someone smart, really smart, tweet that, and I was like, all right, maybe I'm not the only one. Is it hard to understand?
Well, it is and it isn't.
Can you talk about the filibuster without using the word filibuster?
Yes.
You can?
Yes. So from 1957 until John F. Kennedy's assassination, basically, Southern senators used a device that the Senate, both political parties have agreed to, where you can look at it two ways: either to pass a law or even to debate a law, and you can't pass a law till you debate it. You have to have 60 votes instead of 51. The Senate has 100 people in it. If you have 51, you have a pure majority. If you need 60, obviously that's not a majoritarian system. We used to have it for everything, basically. During the Obama administration, the Republican Congress would not approve any of his lower court judges for the District of Columbia. And that was a terrible awful move by McConnell. And it was really important for a lot of different reasons. So that when the Dems got back into power and had a bare majority, we can get rid of the 60 vote requirement if 51 senators agree to get rid of it.
Right.
It was called the nuclear option. I'm sure your listeners remember that. That's what they did for lower court judges. And then, of course,
that's what they did that. They got rid of the 60 rule
requirement.
I'm not going to use these words that we hear so often, nuclear option and filibuster. Okay. They got rid of you need 60 specifically to get these judges confirmed, specifically for the lower court judges confirmed. Yes. They suspended the rule for that game, for that initiative.
Ended it. Suspended. Ended it.
Okay, they ended it, but just for that or for other?
Just for that. Nope. Just for lower court judges.
They ended the filibuster just to get those lower court judges confirmed. But they went back and played by the old rules, the 60, needing 60 majority for other pieces of legislation and
laws
responsibility.
And Supreme Court. For laws and the Supreme Court. The Democrats did not end it for the Supreme Court. The Republicans ended it for the Supreme Court. Justice Gorsuch doesn't become Justice Gorsuch. Justice Kavanaugh doesn't become Justice Kavanaugh. And Justice Barrett doesn't become Justice Barrett if the Republicans don't get rid of the filibuster.
Okay, this is the first time I'm hearing this, so I just want to restate, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But they suspended the 60 majority rule for the lower court judges. Democrats did. Then because Mitch McConnell came in and said, "Oh, you guys started it. You started it. You should.
Yes.
And now we're going to follow suit, and we're going to do it." And then they passed those three judges you just mentioned with a bare majority that they had in the Senate.
Yep.
So let me just pick up then. Okay, so if Mitch McConnell got rid of the filibuster to confirm Supreme Court justices, then where does that put us now with an even Senate and Democrats having the majority because they have the presidency and 50-50?
So as of this moment that you and I are talking, the filibuster still exists for most legislations. There are some appropriation type things that fall and some defense things that fall outside of this. But for most laws, like any laws involving employment or minimum wage, all that stuff, you'd have to have the filibuster. I mean, changed. And it requires 60 votes. By the way, it's not a law or anything. It's just something that Republicans and Democrats in the Senate have agreed to, which is why the Democrats got rid of it for lower court judges by a vote of 51 or whatever. They just barely had a majority. This is just a simple agreement to do it. And the Democrats could get rid of this if the guy from West Virginia goes along. I think I think there are 49 or 48 Democrats who will do it. If it's a tie, 50-50, then of course the vice president gets to break that tie. But people are concerned about the guy from West Virginia.
Why do you refuse the name Senator Manchin?
Senator Manchin, yes. But I talked to a very politically savvy friend tonight in D.C. who thought Biden is playing this exactly right.
How so?
He's kind of slow playing it, especially on the $1.9 trillion, whatever it is, relief thing. And he's going to try to put Manchin in a position where he can't say no, where the Republicans have been so obstructionist that it's going to make it impossible and we'll see if that works out. Greg Sargent, you and I both know, at the Washington Post.
Love him. Big fan. One of the best political analysts in the country, in the world. Washington Post.
He wrote and I like him.
And he loves you. He
likes me, but I like him because he's really good at what he does. And you know that. And he wrote a great column today. I want to plug it. He wrote a great column today about McConnell's hypocrisy, about how McConnell is making this the Democrats want to get rid of the filibuster because they're not in favor of bipartisanship. They just want to do everything. And for McConnell to be saying shit like that is almost beyond.
And by great column, you must mean he has a list of all the ways it's hypocritical. Because when you said that Greg Sargent has an article about Mitch McConnell's hypocrisy, I'm like, well, who doesn't? I mean, everybody's written that piece or said it. When you think of him, he embodies it. They might change the word in the dictionary from hypocrisy to Mitch McConnell, because he is such a walking, unprincipled, situationally ethical person. He is not a consistent in any way. I can't imagine how he is in his personal life.
So I have a political question for you that you can answer as well as I can. I thought that if the Democrats won the Senate, even by one vote, and if Biden was elected, there would be an immediate and strong, maybe COVID is getting in the way of this, but an immediate and strong progressive push for, if nothing else, you have to get Garland's seat back. If nothing else, you have to add a seat to get Garland or someone like him back. Didn't you think that was going to happen? Like a big call for that?
I think that it's what you're asking a great question, and the question more broadly is what should be the Biden Biden administration Democratic Party initiative and agenda, and how should they rank them? And I think that we should be patient to see what happens. But I think that question was an easier or more interesting question before the insurrection at the Capitol, which I do want to talk with you about. Sure. I think what's happening now is there's a certain sense of shock that we are still in, like a post 9/11 shock in a weird kind of way, where we're trying to figure out how we're going to handle that violation.
You mean the traitors?
The crime. Yeah. And people can, I think reasonable people can disagree on how to look at it in many different ways, but I think that's what's happening. And I think that's that and COVID are making it, and this, drive for impeachment, a second impeachment, which I fully support, and I want to ask you about that, of course. I think there's just a lot, and I think that people have different prisms with which they're taking information and media in, and so the question has to be is what exactly should the United States Senate, in this case, or the House, be doing with every day of their time? What should Joe Biden be doing with most of his time? And I think they're putting a lot of eggs in the vaccination basket. I think that's what they should be doing. Well, that is the most important
thing, isn't it? Like, I think that is the most important
thing. And I think what they're learning is that it was even more of a mess than what they'd heard it was.
I know.
And so I think they're scrambling. And I guess I'm giving them a kind of a 2 to 3 week or even month long time period to figure out what the federal and national reaction and operation is going to be on COVID. And especially now you're seeing these variants, which are difficult to try to understand and figure out, and the vaccination. And I guess that's how I'm seeing it. Your question was, why aren't progressives screaming, to fill that the whole Merrick Garland situation? I think it's a great question you're asking. And I haven't thought about it. That's why I'm so wordy.
Well, I think in a non-COVID, attack
doesn't
the
matter.
World,
but it is a COVID attack the Capitol world. So who cares?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I think progressives were so mad. Not even progressives. I think liberals, Democrats were so mad about the Garland thing. But I think A, it's 4 years ago, and B, frankly, COVID and the insurrection are more important. So I think your points are well taken, and I think we should wait. I agree with that.
It's also hard to report out, and then even if it were reported out accurately, react to as a member of the public, an American citizen, the issue of each agency and it's new people coming in and walking through the office and going, "Holy shit, there's a murder here. What happened? Right. Where are the computers? What is going on here? Wait, they did what? They took they erased they didn't back that up. They gave the information to the Chinese. I think that there's just this discovery time period of what did they do to the federal government's ability.
So on that point, Pete, I agree. And
I don't know enough people in the federal government, but the people I have talked to are.
Well, let me tell you that I worked for the Department of Justice starting in November of 1987. That was the end of the Reagan administration. Mm-hmm. And then for the new Bush administration, Bush was Reagan's vice president. They were all Republicans. I was there for that transition, and even that was messy. Like there were, Bush, even that wasn't smooth. So can you imagine this? It's worlds away from Reagan's vice president being the new president and pretty much all the political people saying the same, in a lot of ways. Even that was messy, Pete. I was there. I can tell you.
Well,
it was messy.
I heard that the Clinton people took the W's off the keyboard for the George W. Bush administration. And I don't know.
Always a joke. There is always a joke.
I don't know if that's true, if it happened or not, but if that's the worst thing they had to deal with, then they're in pretty good shape. So, but getting back to my question for the expert, it did start with the filibuster, and we got down the agenda road, which I think is interesting, especially when you're asking about Merrick Garland. It's a great question. But what should they... We've explained a bit of the history of the filibuster, the way that you see it now, and the way that a whole bunch of smart, I think, progressive minds are seeing it is really interesting. General agreement on forget about it. It's over.
Well, but first a disclosure.
And the only question is, how does it come back to bite us in the future when, we lose our majority?
Right. So first a disclosure. I worked on a brief really directly that challenged the constitutionality of the filibuster on behalf of John Lewis, by the way, a few years ago.
Look at you.
I wasn't the lead lawyer, but I helped the lead lawyer. I even got to go to the argument in D.C. Court of Appeals. That was really fun, and sit at council table, which was fun. And doing anything for John Lewis, of course, I was more than happy to do that. But he was challenged. John Lewis, the member of the House, was challenging the filibuster in the Senate, saying if we pass a law in the House and it goes to the Senate, we have a right to have 51 senators vote on it, not 60. Of course, the Supreme Court said he had no standing and dismissed it. I mean, the Court of Appeals said he had no standing, and they didn't ever reach the merits. But I do come with some baggage on this issue, is all I was trying to say. I'm against the filibuster for the same reason I'm against the Supreme Court, for the same reason I'm against Electoral College, for the same reason I'm against stupid 1-2 senators from every state. It's anti-democratic. Now, I'm not saying everything should be a majority vote. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying there has to be a good reason not to have something be a majority vote in a democracy. And I can think of no good reason why the Senate shouldn't act like every other legislative body in the world. And with a majority of votes, you can get things done. And you were saying earlier that it's very hard for this government to get things done for all kinds of reasons. This is one of the main reasons. The Senate does not represent the American people, never has. And the filibuster makes even that worse. So it effectively, think about it this way. You need 60 votes. Wyoming, Montana, all these smaller states. If they don't come along, getting 60 votes is going to be really hard. Right. Why should Montana be able to veto what New York and California want to do?
Well, along that argument, which you've made and I've now made many times about the Senate not being a representative body, people generally understand that, but in case they don't, it basically means that the state like Wyoming, it has just about 1 million people, has 2 senators, and a state like California, it has 30 million people, also has 2 senators. How is that possibly? How does how does Wyoming, 1 million people
and
get
one more footnote to that. But the Supreme Court has held that you can't do it that way. Like the only reason that's even legal is because the Constitution says so. But state legislatures, the House of Representatives, it's one person, one vote. That's what the court held. But it's not one person, one vote.
In every state's legislature, the state House and the state Senate are representative of the actual district, area, county they represent.
Well, gerrymandering, I'm not sure. But at least numerically.
Numerically, yeah. Okay, but I just brought this up and to explain it because I saw a statistic. I'm not sure how accurate it is, but basically that the Democrats in the Senate represent 70 million more Americans. Yeah. Does that sound about right to you? I mean, I'm sure that changes.
I heard 41, but it doesn't matter. Either number's terrible. Doesn't matter.
So, okay. Back to the question.
Think about that for a minute.
Back to the question. You think that Democrats should dump the filibuster to pass legislation with 51 votes?
I understand that means that Republicans will do the same and do the same. I'm looking at it. I'm not looking at it I'm really not. And part of this is because I worked on the brief. I know the history of this, and I'm really not looking at it from a partisan perspective. If we were creating a new country like ours with a House of Representatives, a Senate, a president, and a Supreme Court of some kind, if we were creating that country, we would not make the Senate like this,
right.
Pete. We just wouldn't do. Who would? It doesn't make sense. And there are bad reasons why it's like this, having a lot to do with slavery and Southerners and all that stuff. So, but forget that. Forget our history. if tomorrow an Eastern European country called us and said, we've been communists for a lot of years, we're going to a constitutional democracy, we're going to have an upper and lower house, we're going to have a president, tell us how to do it, you think we would say make the Senate totally dysfunctional, meaning you need a supermajority, and it's not going to represent your people equally? That's ridiculous. Like, who would say that? John Rawls, famous philosopher, had this idea of the veil of ignorance. When you think about really big issues about government and democracy and all that, don't think about it from a Republican, Democrat, or a partisan perspective. Think about it from, if you don't know who's in power, what kind of country do you want? And who would want a Senate where 1 million people have the same power as 30 million people?
Right. If you don't know who's in power.
If you don't know who's in power, right. I mean, Wyoming could be really liberal, right? California could be really conservative. I mean, who knew? I mean, I'm saying, if you're planning without knowing the demographics, why would you ever make the Senate like this? And the answer is you wouldn't. The answer is, historically, it was supposed to be like the House of Lords in England. It really wasn't supposed to be a law-stopping body or even really a law-making body. It was supposed to be kind of a bunch of old wise people who make sure the lower house doesn't do dumb things. But it wasn't supposed to have this much power. And it's just crazy.
Well, I mean, I haven't seen anybody that's defending keeping the filibuster in place, and so my.
Oh, I think there are people who do that.
I'm sure there are. I haven't read any smart.
Most libertarians.
Is that right?
Because they don't want laws passed. If you don't want laws passed, it's a great thing.
Well, all right. Moving from the filibuster, and I want to get to your article, and that's very Dr. Gloomy, and we'll save it for last for that reason. But I really want to get your honest reaction to. We haven't talked. I don't think we've talked at all, much less on the record, since the insurrection, other than maybe some texts. And the raid on the Capitol, and obviously the subsequent move for impeachment. Just give me the short answer first. Do you think that he should be impeached? And is it constitutional to impeach a president after he's gone?
On the second question, it is quite clear to me that it is constitutional to impeach a president after he's gone. We've already had 2 impeachment trials for officers who had already left.
But they weren't president. They were like.
True. I don't know why that would matter. There's a lot of purposes for impeachment, Pete. Removal from office is one of the purposes, but it's not the only purpose. And to the extent the president was involved in this insurrection in a way that is more direct than just his speech. So I'm on record as saying his speech alone, there's nothing else, no history, just that speech. No, that's not impeachable, nor is it punishable. But that speech, plus a lot of other things, like hundreds of tweets and public statements and what he did with the Georgia Secretary of State and all that stuff, I think is clearly impeachable. And I think his call to, I think I've mentioned this to you, his call to the Georgia Secretary of State is an impeachable offense by itself, with nothing else.
Yeah, well, that's not the one. That's not the article of impeach. That's not what they wrote.
I know, it's stupid.
Well, just real quick, though. I think I'm not sure why you say just the speech itself is not impeachable, because, and I have no idea. I'm not even arguing with you here, but I'm trying to give another example. If I stood out in front of your house with a megaphone and screamed, Professor Segall is murdering babies and puppies in there, and we have to stop him. Hurry, everybody, go in there. And everybody went in there, and you were just sitting there with a couple of guinea pigs eating popcorn, which is what I think you generally do.
Three guinea pigs.
Yeah, I would be inciting an invasion into your home. I'm telling everybody to go in there. Donald Trump stood there and said over and over, everybody go to the Capitol. And
but what he didn't say was go to the Capitol and violently break it. He didn't say that.
Okay.
Not in that speech. He didn't.
I mean, I don't have the speech memorized. He said he used a lot of.
I read every word.
He used a lot of language.
I wrote a piece for Mike about this on the blog, Dorf on Law, about incitement, free speech, and that speech. And remember, you're talking to somebody who has a European view of free speech, not an American view of free speech, right? So I am not a free speech absolutist or even close to that by any standards. The 4 corners of that speech, he says, we're going to march down to the Capitol, we're going to march down, all that. If you just read the speech, and I did several times, unless you have a context, Pete, that speech is protected.
Okay,
speech.
well, aren't we talking about two separate things? Aren't we talking about the legal requirement for incitement of blank?
No, I'm talking about for impeachment. I'm talking about legal crime for
You can
impeachment.
impeach someone for whatever you want.
That speech, I'm telling you, if you just read that speech, you won't find anything in there impeachable.
Yeah, but
you won't.
Well, according to who? Who says that it's not?
Because it's not enough. Yes, he never uses the word violence. He never even suggests violence. His
campaign promoted the event, brought everybody to come here, and most importantly, what about the example that like countless people who broke in said the reason I did it is because he told me to. Donald Trump, the president, told me to. How is that? So the question becomes, in your opinion, I didn't hear anything. But in the people who invaded, who committed the crimes opinion, that's what they heard. So your interpretation is yours and fine, but their interpretation is that he gave them an order.
We need to back up that whole conversation. Oh. First of all, I agree that that Trump's overall behavior is impeachable. So we agree on that. His overall about the invasion on the Capitol is impeachable. His overall behavior about denying the election and all that stuff is impeachable.
What if it comes out that he denied the National Guard?
That too. That's really impeachable if that happens.
That's super impeachable, I would say.
What I wrote is, if he in any way, shape, or form used his office to do anything to make it officially easier for them to break in, for the National Guard not to, of course that's impeachable. But I want to get back to your hypo, Pete, because I do think I'm going to convince you in about 2 minutes. It doesn't matter what the people who broke in said, unless they have a text from the president, please do something violent. If Martin Luther King gives a pretty good speech, and he didn't preach violence, but towards the end he also didn't preach not violence. And if his speech leads to some nutcases using violence that he wouldn't have wanted, he's not responsible for that. That's not how life works. That's not how First Amendment works. Now, if Martin Luther King had obviously, written a letter to somebody, do violence, that's different. But if someone is inspired by a speech that doesn't mention violence to do violence, we need more information before we can say that speech is not protected political speech. Where I'm a First Amendment nut is on pure political speech. When someone is saying the government's bad, the government's good, the government should change, we have to protect that speech. I mean, we do. That's democracy. That's where we have to. That's the sweet spot for free speech. And the four corners of his speech is protected, but it's not protected in the context of what happened for 5 weeks before that event. And that's my only point.
I think there are smart people who disagree with you on that.
There are. Mike disagrees with it. But I'm trying to take my partisanship out of, I don't like.
No, you're definitely taking your partisanship out of it, which is why I think people like you, because you're seeing it in a far more objective way. And I think you're wrong. And
well, let me be clear. The first
smart person who dismantles your argument about the four corners is the person I'll be agreeing with.
Oh, I think a lot of free speech experts, liberal and conservative in the United States, think that speech by itself is not impeachable. It's just everything around the speech that. So it is an all things considered question. It's not just the speech. It's the speech and everything else. I'm very unpopular, Peter. You know this. I'm very unpopular among free speech professors in the United States because I have a very different view on free speech, but very different. Like hate speech, I have a very different view. Hate speech is protected. I probably wouldn't protect it. Yeah. So
why? Why is it a moral issue?
So I talked about this in my
the argument against that is that it just becomes worse. It drives it underground and it becomes worse. But that's a policy question.
Right. I am not answering the policy question. I'm saying the Supreme Court shouldn't stop laws designed to.
You're answering you're answering a legal question.
Yes. So in Germany, if you deny the Holocaust, you can go to jail.
If you wave a swastika, you post a swastika.
I think so. Really, would it be that terrible if we decided, especially in the South, you know what? You just like we don't want anybody using the N-word, we don't want anybody waving a Confederate flag. Because the reason it's illegal in Germany.
Would it be that terrible? What kind of threshold question is that?
Well, because there's no there are
It would be terrible for people who like to wave the Confederate flag. And so
what I mean is there are almost no law professors in the United States who would say if the state of Georgia turned blue, really blue, and passed a law outlawing the showing of the Confederate flag in Georgia. There is not a law professor in the United States except me and maybe three others who would say that's constitutional. They would all say it's unconstitutional. My friend Jeff Stone at the University of Chicago, one of the great liberals of all time, unconstitutional. My friend Erwin Chemerinsky, who's the dean of UC Irvine, was now the dean of Berkeley, one of the great liberals of our time, wrote a book called The Case Against the Supreme Court. He would strike down that law in the state of Georgia. So what I'm trying to say is the reason, and let me get this out. The reason why you can't deny the Holocaust or wave a swastika flag in Germany is because they understand the connection between speech and actual harm. In this country, we don't get that connection. So
we should.
I know, but we don't. That's why a law saying you can't have a Confederate flag you can't wave a Confederate flag in public would be unconstitutional. And there are no law professors, except for maybe 2 or 3 out of 1,000 who would say that's a constitutional law. That's how far. That's what Chris was saying. That's what Chris was saying today. We are so far removed from the rest of the world in so many ways involving the role the Supreme Court plays. This country doesn't have the devotion to freedom of speech that everybody talks about. It's the Supreme Court that has that devotion to freedom of speech. And so there are really, really smart critical race theorist law professors who think that when you balance suppressing speech against not suppressing speech, you have to really look at the harm. So in Germany, they say, we don't want another Holocaust. And we think not allowing it to ferment is the way to do that. I'm not saying yes or no in the policy. Georgia is not allowed to make that decision about the Confederate flag. And the only reason Georgia can't make a decision is because of 5 or 9 unelected life tenured lawyers in Washington.
By the way, you tweeted the other day a picture and an opinion that at the base of Stone Mountain,
yes,
they have Confederate flags, and while they fly lower than the American flag, they should be removed. And I was surprised that they even fly them.
There's a law. They claim they can't remove them because they're considered monuments somehow. And you can't. It's the whole thing is so stupid. Peter gets me so mad.
A monument is generally considered some kind of natural preserve or a home that Mark Twain lived in.
But, I don't know what they mean by monuments.
But it's a flag. How do they get named that a monument? So it's protected.
There are people in Georgia working to get rid of those flags, obviously, and they're running up against all kinds of legal.
Wow, I want to dig into that and support them.
Well, forget the legal arguments. It is so pernicious to have those Confederate flags at the opening of what I think, pretty sure, is the most visited public park in the state of Georgia. I mean, this is at the bottom. The Stone Mountain Park is huge, and there are different things and different exhibits. But if you want to climb Stone Mountain, which is what a lot of people do because it's really good exercise and it's beautiful on top, you walk past these flags. And how can the Confederate flag still be flying at a state-owned, taxpayer-funded? I'm sorry, I'm getting mad.
No,
go ahead. It's crazy, Pete.
That's what I was about to ask. Is it public land? It's state-owned?
Yes, the state-owned public park.
It's a real surprising thing. And of course, and even worse, the etchings, the engravings into the mountain itself are of Confederate generals, aren't they?
No, that's different. So I'll say that's different, and here's why.
Is that right? That there's
the
engravings
of Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee and all these people. Yes, it's an amazing sculpture. Unlike Confederate statues and monuments that could literally be taken to a museum someplace, which is what I would do with them. I wouldn't wipe the history away. I would have there's a Holocaust museum. I'd have a Confederacy museum, and I would show all the evil, pernicious things they did. You can't move Stone Mountain. So you have to either destroy it or whatever. Now, what I think we should do is put a sign on it that says some kind of big thing that people. So there's a gondola. You can either climb the mountain or you can go on a gondola to the top. Mm-hmm. If you take the gondola, you actually go right by the monument. By the way, like, I don't know the exact thing, but like the fingers of the people are as big as school buses. I mean, Pete, it is so huge. It is such a big monument.
It's four guys on horses, right? I'm looking at it.
It's a work of art.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Right. So we can't just, I think blowing it up is a bad idea. What we could do is figure out a way, especially with technology these days, is to put something on there to say, this is a reminder of the sins of these people. This is a reminder that America, was once a slave-owning country, and these people fought for that. And, some kind of disclaimer is all I'm saying.
I mean, couldn't they just, like, on the side, etch in a Bernie Sanders meme sitting there with his mittens, or a Dr. King with his arms crossed looking down at them like,
I would like that. That's
horses,
a good idea.
Stop. Putting his hand up.
The idea. So real quick, what happened was I've done that trail a million times, and not a million times. I've done that trail like 30 times in my life, both 30 years ago for charity when I was a college student and with my kids. And it was Sarah, my who was at the time like 11. We were climbing the trail at the very bottom, and she looked up and went, "Dad, what are those Confederate flags doing here?" So I kind of never even noticed it really. And she gets outraged by a lot of things, and she was outraged. And it really hit me. Like, our kids are seeing this, and a lot of kids, unlike my Sarah, are going to look at it and go, "Oh, that's my heritage."
Well, they're not smart enough. Most kids are not smart enough to say that's my heritage. But that's the whole thing with the statues and flags. Statues and flags to a child represent something to be respected.
Yes.
Something that is honoring something. That's what they are to a small child. So you automatically have reverence for the statue, for the flag. And that's it. That's all the psychology you need to know. So you think it's okay. You think it's a good thing.
So forget my blog post, because I really want to talk about this. Because you and I started talking about this when you were down in Georgia at the Serenbe, where you did a bunch of green stuff and things.
Green stuff and things. God, Jesus. So condescending.
Sorry. No, not to you, just to climate change. No, I'm a convert. You and Linda convinced. Sorry.
By the way, check out my new website, greenstuffandthings.org. It's a nonprofit.
You and I were talking about the South, remember? And
in the South.
So I'm trying to locate this spot. And I've been talking to Southerners about this, friends of mine. So I have friends who are not racist and no more racist than you or I. They are no more racist than you and I. And because their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents are from the South, there is still some feeling that the Civil War destroyed something about their culture that's not slavery that they want to get back. And they can't articulate it, but they admit the emotion's there. It's kind of like the War of Northern Aggression.
They admit, you have conversations with people that say the Civil War did something.
Well, they're in favor of the Civil War. They're in favor of slavery being abolished. They're in favor They're in favor of all that. But they also have a sense of loss.
What? I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. What do they say to you? What is the conversation that you have with people sound like when they say they have a sense of loss?
There's nothing in Atlanta older than 1890, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Atlanta existed, 1790 or something, because Sherman burned it all down, right? Burned to the ground. Atlanta was burned to the ground. There's some. I'm trying to tell you. I haven't located it yet, but there are smart, non-racist Southerners who still have a Southern identity that they think is separate from racism, but I have a hard time seeing separate from racism. Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't make sense.
On.
No, it doesn't to me. But I don't.
You don't think New Yorkers have an identity?
No, I think it's all stupid. I do. I honestly, God,
you're wrong.
I'll tell you what. I think the identity of where you kind of came from, to a certain extent, is dumb. Because the idea, unless you came from a place, frankly, where you suffered a lot of adversity over and over, tragedy and natural disasters, a lot, poverty, then I'm not that interested, because the thing I hate is Boston strong, New York strong, Oh, we'll recover from this. We're from San Francisco. It's all horseshit to me.
Okay,
people aren't tougher here than over here, and this kind of like regional identity that a lot of people have.
Wait.
The reason I push, let me just finish. The reason I push back is because of where I grew up. Where I grew up is a very rural area. Yep. White, overwhelmingly Christian, specifically even Catholic. Yep. Very homogenous.
Yep.
Upper middle class, but a lot of poor folks too, because it was rural. My mom came from a super poor family. Like, then I moved to New York City, then I moved to suburbs, blah, blah, blah. But like, what does that mean about me? What is my regional identity I think it's horseshit.
I am not.
But a lot of people listening to me are probably thinking I'm an arrogant and ignorant person, and you may be right. I'd love to hear why I'm wrong, but
I think you're confusing two things.
Oh,
sorry. We're not having a conversation about the pros and cons, good or bads, a normative conversation about this issue. I am giving you a description. You can argue about it good or bad. I am telling you that I grew up in Long Island. Trust me when I tell you that
terrible people, all of them.
Well, yeah, that's true. But no, it's not all of them. But a lot of them. Mike Dorf's right next. Sorry, Mike, you're not terrible.
No, I mean, I'm joking. Go ahead.
But but wait. But Long Islanders have an identity, Pete. They do. And
yeah, it's called assholery.
Yeah. And I think people in the Midwest, the reason we have this stereotype about the Midwest is because I think there is a identity of being from Indiana, from rural Ohio in this country. And I think there is a, Northern Californian kind of liberal thing that goes on. What I'm telling you is a descriptive matter, not I defend it or don't defend it. Is a lot of our nation's this is not debatable. Our nation's politics from 1787 until today have been severely affected by the politics of the South.
No doubt about it. That I will not disagree with.
The whole Southern strategy, everything. From the compromise, the 3/5 compromise, where the South got African Americans counted as 3/5 of a person, even though they had no rights, to the Civil War, to Nixon turning the South Republican. There's a Southern thing, Pete. That just
is. But here's the thing that I think that we're misidentifying, which I think is important, and I think other people might have picked up on it while listening to us. I think a regional identity is far weaker and less interesting than a cultural identity, and so I think that white people from the South have a different identity than black people from the South. It's completely different experiences, therefore, which is why talking about it. It doesn't catch it all. And but I mean, I can extend that anywhere. I think you mentioned the Midwest. I'm from the Northeast. You talk about Northern California, Southern California, Texas, whatever. It's a question to me of resilience.
I don't know what that means.
Meaning your cultural resilience. What did you live through? What resources did you have? An upper class person and a more affluent person in Northeast is not relatable to a poor person in the Northeast. They have very little in common, other than knowing how to drive in the snow.
I'm from the Northeast, and I have no freaking idea how to drive.
But does my argument have no validity? Is it just transparently bullshit? Because I'm making it up as I go along.
Well,
never thought about this.
Let me be clearer. I started saying this earlier, and I think you interrupted. We can play the tape. If your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents were white and from the South, and this will change as time goes on, but if you're a 50-year-old man today, that means, your parents were very much part of segregation, like, separate water fountains, separate public parks, separate jails, separate phone booths, not just schools, separate everything. And then you take their grandparents, now we're talking sharecroppers, and then you take their parents, then we're talking, slavery. My point about this is,
I think what you failed to do is mention white Southerners have a legacy that they can't quite explain, but let's be clear, their parents were a generation white Southerners who were generally segregationist, and their parents were pro-slavery, maybe, or
so
not
what
their
these
parents,
people,
their grandparents.
So what my Southern friends today
your white
think,
Southern friends,
yes, my white,
because none of your black Southern friends probably
That's
hold
fair.
this opinion.
That's totally
But
fair.
it matters to your point, I think, is important.
Well, maybe not. I'm not sure.
Well, what do white Southern people think? I think matters.
My white Southern friends who are not racist, some of them still have a feeling about their heritage that they're prideful in. When we discussed this last time, everybody called and said I was right. You remember? I mean,
I was changed after that, but you were talking. Yeah. You weren't making this point.
It was very similar. No, I was.
But you were talking about how racist everybody was down there, and I
wasn't. I did not say that. Stop saying that's not.
You were not. That's what I recollect. The point was that I was saying they're
no.
We're on the same conversation we did then.
We are having a more advanced conversation because I've thought about it more since then. There is a sweet spot between racism and having no pride in one's Southern heritage at all. That is very, very there, Pete. It is just there. You got to trust me on this. And it's easier for me to see. I've been here 30 years, but I am an outsider in the sense, like, I was born and raised in New York. There are people who would vote for progressive legislation, affirmative action, all kinds of things, who are really not racist, but still feel there's something about the South that was lost, that was valuable, that was separate from race. And that's frustrating to me because I want to shake them and say, no, you're defined by race. The Southern culture was always defined by race, but it's not a fair thing to say to them because they're not racist. They didn't vote for segregation. They weren't slave owners. And that's not what they're talking about.
I don't know. I don't know about are you missing, or do you not agree with the terminology of not being racist and being anti-racist?
That's a whole long conversation.
Do you disagree with that differentiation? Because the difference to me, when you keep saying they're not racist, this is what I hear. They're not overtly doing and thinking racist things.
It's so much more complicated than that. Let me give you an example. I have friends who are really pro-choice, right? And their main agenda in life is to secure the kind of reproductive rights for women you and I want our daughters to have. And if you question them on racial questions, they give all the right answers. But they haven't devoted their life to actively pursuing that because they have another cause that they think is as important. I'm not going to second guess those judgments.
I know, but
I'm not going to call them anti-racist.
No, but is that okay? Let me explain what I mean. In every aspect of your life, you do whatever you can to make sure that there are opportunities for people of color within any of the thing you're doing. PTA, Little League, and if the movement is the women's movement, there's obviously the intersectionality of race and gender there.
No question.
That needs to be always thought about. To be anti-racist is to make sure that you're not just working with the old network that you're familiar with because of what our culture creates, because of how we self-segregate. The idea of being anti-racist is to make sure that you're being thoughtful about all people, specifically in this country, people of color who are dealing with the legacies that we've been talking about for years of all of this. It's to be actively on the offense, to do stuff, to create opportunities. You don't have to go out.
Let me push it. Hold on. Let me push it. I mean, I'm not disagreeing, but
if you're at your job and you have internships,
let me play law professor. Hold on. Let me play law professor with you for a minute. Yes, people in positions to affect things.
Everybody is. No.
Well, hold on. Let me finish.
Not in positions. Everybody. You're on the bus.
Well, Pete, you are a farmer who votes Democrat and is generally liberal in Iowa, of which there are many, I think. And you are suffering, and you can barely feed your family, and you can barely feed your animals, and things economically for you are really hard. And I am not going to criticize that person for not going out in the world and doing something active to help.
No, it's not what I'm saying. You don't have to go out in the world. You have to have a consciousness of when there are any opportunities to take for granted the fact that maybe a person. And most people don't have that opportunity because they don't live around people of color necessarily. If that's who we're talking about, because we're so self-segregated. But let's be also clear: if you work anywhere in the world, we're not talking about your farmer example, and they offer internships. Are you sure to be looking for internships where there are diverse ethnic backgrounds?
We agree. I agree. No argument.
Are you working a little harder to ask about why that isn't the case? If it is, none of that shit is hard. It's a consciousness and an effort that requires very little, and can be a huge game changer.
Let's bring it closer to home. So my podcast, right? I have tried.
I don't have black guests here.
I've tried to be you and Justice Kagan, who had one black law clerk her entire career. Think about that for Justice Ginsburg. Excuse me, Justice Ginsburg had one.
Wow, what's that all about?
Person on the Supreme Court. She had one person of color. No one knows. Big mystery about her. No one talks about it now because she's dead. But it was a big problem.
Wow.
But let's take my little teeny weeny podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I have tried to be very sensitive to issues of gender and race in doing that. And so, of course, I want to have as diverse a group as possible. And I want to have a podcast where people disagree with me.
Mm-hmm.
Those two goals are almost irreconcilable because there just aren't conservative people of color law professors. Like there really aren't. I mean, there's in con law. I mean, there may be a couple, but
that's fine. I mean, that's not fine. That's a very good example of an opportunity where you can't find the person to fill that category.
But I could have 50 people of color law professors who are liberals come onto my podcast. You list a really interesting example. You're trying to find a black guy who's a conservative, constitutional, legal mind. Yes.
I mean, there's got to be some.
There are very few.
Well, you should have some of them. Good luck.
Thanks. We went far astray. I do want to say this Southern thing. The reason I want your listeners to understand why you and I keep bringing this up, we do repeatedly, is because
you live in the South and have strong opinions.
It's an historical fact that our national politics has been dramatically and terribly affected by Southern politics. That's the fact. Slavery at the beginning, and then segregation, and then literacy tests, and stopping people of color from voting, and the Civil Rights Act, and the Voting Rights Act. It's all. I'm not saying there isn't institutional racism in San Francisco and Des Moines. There is, but our Southern politics as a region, Reagan doesn't become president even with his landslide without Democrats in the South changing political parties, which Nixon started and Reagan finished. The Southern strategy was called that for a reason. So politics in the South is really important. And I'm a Yankee who's been in the South 30 years. And I think the rest of the country needs to understand better what's happening in the South. So, for example, my wife and I were having a very interesting, I thought, hypothetical discussion. We both really support Stacey Abrams. We did, last time she ran for governor. I think she'll win as governor next time. I think we'll finally have a black governor. No, she hasn't announced, but I think she will. But here's the question. Would you rather have Stacey Abrams as governor of Georgia or turn Texas blue? And we want both because we're both Democrats. But the point of that even having that conversation.
And by turning Texas blue, you mean that she would go run there?
I just mean she would devote her energies to doing what she did in Georgia in Texas. Is what she did
that's
in Georgia
that's a very easy answer.
Really? What is it? What's your answer?
I mean, what kind of influence can any governor have over the state dramatically to create change, much less the kind of influence of turning the entire state, especially a state as big as Texas with that many people in it, blue? How is that debatable between you and your wife?
We weren't. We didn't.
I don't understand how much of an influence a governor can have in Georgia or anywhere else.
It turns out a lot, but symbolically, a black female governor from the state of Georgia would be incredibly, incredibly important. Not as important as Texas turning blue, although for women and people of color, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Anyway, that is the point. That's my point. That conversation, Pete, think of how you would repeat that conversation outside the South. Like, what would the equivalent be outside the South? And you'll see very quickly the stakes aren't as high.
What do you mean? I'm sorry. What's the conversation outside the South?
So that's so the we're probably boring everybody. The hypothetical question is: you only get one wish. You can have, if you're a progressive, you can have Stacey Abrams as governor of Georgia, or you can have Texas turning blue, but you can't have both. Which do you pick? And I actually think there are reasonable arguments on both sides of that hypothetical question. But now replicate that in the North or the West, or even the Midwest, you won't be able to.
Well, you
won't. The emotional stuff won't be there because it's different.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, are more important. They just are. They always have been.
Well, that's because of the underlying cause there.
The racism.
Yeah,
I agree.
But
which is why it's interesting. Which is why it's going full circle, and I'm sure everybody's turning us off now because this has been terrible. But going full circle, that's why it's interesting to me to have liberal, progressive, white Southern friends who are not in any way racist, but still feel a link to Southern culture.
I don't know. I still don't understand what that link to Southern culture.
I don't either.
And what,
I've been trying to figure it out.
But what is the conversation? What are they saying? You're not being specific enough and helping me understand what the fuck they mean. Do they not say it? Is that your feeling? What do they say?
I guess maybe where I
get
went
them
wrong
on this show. I want to know exactly what you're talking about when they're not racist, but they have a link to their Southern heritage. By the way, I guess I get also. I'm very ignorant about. Yeah, well, I'm ignorant about heritage because I have none myself. I feel.
Yes, you do. That's not true.
I don't.
I disagree.
Well, how would you describe my heritage? In any way that has to do with anything, frankly, regional or ethnic, outside of my love of winter and different seasons because of where I grew up. I mean, that's one of the things I was going to say. Whatever.
Do you think you grew up in Alabama? You were a skier?
No, but that's not.
Okay.
Okay. I think it's a silly hypothetical, but I think what's not is that there are people like me who are third generation white, not religious. So like I don't have any heritage. I'm not, Jewish people have heritage and ethnicity. Black folks, mine. Yeah, yours, but you still have that to some extent in your life. You understand it.
No, I run away from it.
I know that you do, but it's there. It exists. I have nothing. I have no heritage, and I'm not complaining about that. I'm saying I don't relate to people who have this pride.
Well, your wife certainly does.
Yes, she has a pride in her Sicilian heritage for sure.
Yes. So, but let's get back to what I'm saying.
I have nothing.
You're everything to me, Pete. I think
there are things I like to do.
So sometimes academics like me get a germ of an idea, get obsessed about it for terrible reasons, and should let it go. Mm. This might so I started teaching in 1991. I wrote my book Supreme Myths in 2012. In the late 90s, I had this feeling about the court that I could not put into words. That this is wrong. Like, this is bad. This is not how we should run it. It took me a long time to get that germ of an idea to something original. I have a germ of an idea that we started talking about on your show when you were in the state of Georgia, and phone calls came in that were interested in the subject. I have a germ of an idea that if we can locate what it is about the South and Southerners, white people, not talking about African Americans, that they take pride in that is not race, then we can, as progressives, make progress.
I think here's why I think it's a bad idea. Because you're right, that would be helpful. I think that there's a more pragmatic idea, which is move more black people and progressive people into the South and let those people and their stupid heritage die with it. Because really, I don't care about their heritage. Whatever that question that they have that they're struggling with, I have very little empathy for it. Who cares? It'll be gone soon, just like mine is gone, because after a few generations, it's fucking gone. So either they go, their ideas go, or you move in black folks.
You're oversimplifying. You're oversimplifying. Let me give you. So the example I've given to you before, which you've understood before a little bit, is a friend of mine who is a very, very, very liberal Catholic who has worked for both Biden and Obama.
I reject very, very, very liberal Catholic because all the social justice, it's still the most patriarchal institution in the world. No one can convince me that in 2021 you can call yourself liberal, progressive, and be involved with this patriarchal institution. Go ahead.
So in 2002 or so, I asked this person over some drinks, but we were both sober.
Should women be able to speak? And what did he say?
How can you be a member of an institution that is so sexist?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand it.
Yeah.
Because you're not, I said to him, you're not sexist in any way. And you are right. I'm right. I think your views on politics are perfect. And I don't understand how you can go to Catholic church every Sunday, given your views. And his answer to me was, you're right about the Catholic Church. Women should be priests. This is back in 2002. Their views on gays and lesbians are horrific, and all that stuff. And then he said, and I'll never forget it as long as I live, he said, Eric, I can no more shed my Catholic identity, because he grew up very Catholic. I could no more shed that identity than I could stop being an American, because I think George Bush is a terrible
president.
Such
a fucking... I've heard you tell that before. And
it's a good answer.
No, it's not. And I'll tell you why. Being American is immutable unless you leave America, which no one's expecting. Yeah, you were born American. That's me. You didn't have a choice as to where you were born.
But you can leave anytime you want.
You can, not really. It's not that easy to. It's not.
He could.
Well, you can leave. See, this is the thing. I've heard you say that before, and it's not resonating as much today. And you know why? Because I'm in this irritated.
I've irritated you?
Yes, but not you. The arguments that you're making.
Just a minute.
And because I did shed my Catholicism.
I shed my Judaism. Believe me, I know.
So I have a hard time. I guess.
No, because Pete, it was never because my view on Judaism and your view on Catholicism are very different than how my friend grew up. And I think a lot of people listening.
If you grew up very Catholic, what does that mean? You're probably right. I'm sure a lot of people will sympathize and disagree with me and cancel their subscriptions to the program.
It means he has a certain kind of faith that transcends local politics, as it were.
Why not have the faith, but not participate in the institution, which not only is the most patriarchal institution in the world, it is the most corrupt for reasons that are so reprehensible. There's nothing worse than the.
No, that's not a fair portrayal. It is the most sexist institution maybe in the world.
No, the pedophile, the Catholic Church pedophile scandal. It should have taken that church down and ended it. They should have to sell everything they have to their victims. They should give all of the compensation for all the bullshit gold they have.
You know what would happen? But if they did that, you know what would happen? There'd be millions of people in the world, millions, who wouldn't be fed because they're fed by
someone else would fill the void. Some other organization. So. Let them evolve. Let them evolve and get rid of all of their patriarchy and keep all of their social good that they do, by the way. But get rid of their patriarchy and destroy all of the parts, the legacy of the pedophile. The pedophile. The crimes are still being committed every day in the Catholic Church.
I agree.
And being covered for. And so when people, I have such a hard time. And listen, I know a lot of people who are Catholic who are better in every way as people than I am. They just
I don't know what that means.
Well, they just have better qualities. They treat people better. They're more generous. They're more kind. All kinds of different things. I'm not saying that I just know that my opinions can come off as sanctimonious, but my opinion is at the root of it is I can't be a member of a club that doesn't allow women and covers for pedophiles. Can't join you. Right. I can still have a lot of the beliefs of the tenets of the club, but I ain't coming to the club anymore.
But let me.
And you're certainly not getting my money.
So in that podcast I did with that priest, but in other conversations too, one thing I've come to appreciate, and if nothing else in this podcast is good, I hope this is, you and I can't really relate to people of strong faith because you and I don't have that. And so, for example, there are really smart people in this world. I called my book Originalism is Faith for a very specific reason. I think originalism is irrational. I think faith is irrational, not necessarily bad, just irrational. And those two things are very similar. And I got such pushback from liberal Jewish friends of mine and Catholic friends of mine because I make a distinction between faith and reason. That they don't. They don't think there's any. They think there's a lot of ways to harmonize faith. I don't have this debate with you right now. I'm just saying anyone who thinks that you can harmonize faith and reason, I don't understand. And I don't pretend to understand. So you, my friend, might want to have a little more humility about people whose parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents raised them in a faith in a way that makes it very difficult for them to escape that link to that faith. Because you and I don't have it. And if we don't have it, we can't really appreciate it. That's what I've learned. How's that?
You arrogant prick. That was beautiful. You really turned me around. No, you really did. I listened to the whole thing, and I could feel myself being turned around. I'm dead serious. No,
my wife.
Very few people could say that to me. You should have more humility, but many should. But I tried to. Obviously, I don't know much. I have strong opinions and all this stuff. But when you said that you and I were not raised with a strong faith and can't relate to, that really hit me. It really did. That was great.
Yeah.
I really very much appreciate that, and it's also why I appreciate your friendship and your honesty with me. Well, it was a great set of points.
But I want to be clear that I think the Catholic Church is pernicious in many, many ways.
I know that you think that.
Been taken down.
No, I know that you think that, and I think that it's all great points that you've made.
Yeah, I mean, and I think back to Nixon too, Pete. I really do. I think back to Nixon because it's before you were born. But I was 10. I was actually 14 when he was elected the second time. But even in '68, I was 10, and all my friends' parents were like, "We're moving. If Nixon wins, we're moving." You know,
elected the second time.
But the first time, I mean, if Nixon wins, we're moving, and of course none of them did. But my point there though is they really hated him. Like people, I mean, they really did, Pete. My dad hated Nixon so much, but he's still an American. So my friend says to me, I hate these policies. God, I hate them. But there's a lot of good things. I like the Catholic Church's policies on the death penalty. I like the Catholic Church's policies on charity. And so it's a divided thing. This is, and
what does it mean to still be the whole allegiance to America? Like he's still American. Like I would move out of this motherfucker in a heartbeat if it wasn't for the many, many friendships, and obviously my parents.
Do you not consider yourself American in a very fundamental way? No,
I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know what it means.
Before you answer, let me just say, I'm a naturalized. As you know, I was born in Canada. I got naturalized at 23. So it was a very conscious act on my part. So in some ways, I always think of that as I chose to be an American. I didn't have to. I chose to be an American.
I always forget that.
I was an adult. I was an adult as a Canadian. But I think, Pete, most people in America, even many people of color, think there's something identifiably American they're proud of. That's just part of who they are. I don't have any pride. I don't have any pride. There's not about me because I think this country is a country that was founded on a lot of horrible ideas that it was.
And that a lot of them won out. But the idea that's the most horrible isn't, to me, the racism at this point. The idea that destroys us now is the individualism. I don't relate to that. I think it's preposterous. I think it makes no sense. I don't think it's real. I don't think anybody's an actual individual. And that is what makes America, the rest of the world. What's the difference between us and most of the rest of the world? It's they look at the we and we look at the I. Everything to me about being American comes back to that. And when people say you're a real American or that's American, I don't know what that means because we're such a diverse country. So I don't know what it means to be American, but there's too many terrible things. And it's mostly terrible. And by the way, the good things about being American are also very Swiss and Japanese and Canadian. I mean, you can find the good things that you have in America in any other country. It's the bad things that we have. The lack of opportunity, capital punishment, racism, no health care. Like it's horrible. It's harder to be American than it is in so many other countries at this point.
So I think the first of all, I think that was great and very eloquent. And yes, I do. And I think we might consider ending on that note, but I'm going to ruin the ending by saying, I think a lot of your listeners would relate to the idea that even though there's many things about America that they don't like, many things, and and that we've made a lot of mistakes along the way, starting with not slavery, but the indigenous people who we massacred, displaced, et cetera. And there is still something about being an American that they're proud of. And it's not tangible. It's not identifiable. It's just.
Well, then I'm not interested. If it's not identifiable, if it's not.
Well, you have to be, my friends, you have to be interested because what I'm describing is true. You may not agree with it.
No, I do. I agree with you, but I'm not interested. But it doesn't mean I have to be interested. If you can't describe what, and I'd love for people listening to tell me the answer to the question. But what is so great about being American that
it's not good or bad? No.
That is not available in any other country.
No, you're missing the point. Oh. That's not my point. Oh. It's not a good bad point. Just like it's not a good bad point.
Well, what does it mean? Okay, what is it then? What's the question? I'm
trying to explain what my friend was saying about his relationship to the Catholic Church.
Yeah,
is that he doesn't view it as a choice, and I think there are a lot of Americans who don't view their American identity as a choice. It's just who they are. And who they are, and Peter, we're all flawed. Who I am and who you are is good and bad. I have good and bad, you have good and bad. We're all flawed. For example, I'm a father, Pete. A big point of ours, you too. A big part of your identity is you being a father. A big point of my identity is you being a father. It's part of who I am. I think a lot of people think being a Southerner is part of who I am. Being an American is part of who I am. Being a Catholic is part of who I am, even with all the infirmities and terrible things the church, America, and the South has done.
Okay, well, I can take anything that anybody wants to say and make it better in another country. For example, my identity as a father in America. Why do I think I'm a good father? Because I have tried. One reason. I've done everything I can to spend as much time with my kids as possible.
Okay.
That's easier in almost every other Western European country. You can spend more. You can spend more time with it. You can be a better father. Right. In America, now the converse of that is, of course, America makes men and fathers especially have to think so much about competition and work and having more and better and all the time increasing your material wealth, and you've got no time because you're constantly working. It's very American. So it makes it harder to be a good dad.
Pete, everything you're saying is right. And everything you're saying is logical. Wait. This is not an issue of logic and rationality.
I know. No, I understand what you're saying, the essence of being American. But my question is, what does it mean to each person? Because it means something different. And my further question is, what's different about America that's somehow better at this point in 2021 than any other country in the world? The answer, by the way, is clear. It's America itself. The United States of America landscape, our natural environment, is the best thing about America, but we're destroying it faster than almost anybody but the Chinese. And they don't have as good of a country as we do, naturally, in my opinion.
So what my friend Bill and I were talking about today is on every metric, healthcare, wage disparities, almost every metric, America pales compared to a lot of the free world. But what I'm saying, Pete, isn't about that. That's a different, you were having two separate conversations here. I can tell you that that statistically, Tom Brady is in fact the greatest quarterback of all time because his playoff record is insane. I think he's won 33 playoff games. Number 2 is 17. Like he has or something like that. And I despise Tom Brady with every single bone in my body. Those are two separate conversations. I hate him, and I think he's the best quarterback ever. It's not close. Even Joe Montana. All right. the pros and cons of America, you can come out con as the bottom line. And I wouldn't argue with you at all about that. The fact that we don't have universal health care is crazy. That doesn't change my point. That in talking about the filibuster and politics and how this country works, the idea that this identification of being American is really important is just a fact you have to deal with. Going back to the South, Southern politics are a fact that national politics.
It is a fact that you have to deal with. I don't disagree, but I want to be clear. We shouldn't have to. Like nationalism, patriotism, origin of your country. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You didn't do anything to be born there. It's where you were born and raised. I understand why you root for the Americans and why I understand those things, but they don't particularly interest me. It seems very silly in a way, especially in America where there's so much lack of equity and fairness and horror, just horror in so many different ways.
I think what I want to say about that is, again, you are approaching things from a objective, logical, rational perspective. And
that's how I approach things, and that's how I have to have a conversation, generally speaking, about things. So I hope that people will react to this and give us, wherever
they're going to hate you. They're going to hate your guts, I can tell you right now.
Yeah, probably. I think my opinions on these things are not particularly well thought out yet.
No, they are. I need to make a point for Tina Winsett. Okay. In the context of this conversation, Segall is not Mr. Doom and Gloom. It's the other guy. Let's be clear about that.
Well, if people read the piece that I originally had booked you to talk about, it would further my argument about how America has become a garbage place for in terms of morality and opportunity and equity and pollution. I mean, like it's
true.
Survival of the fittest is what America is. It's just a bunch of people running up a mountain, punching the people right below, trying to get to the top of the mountain. And then once they get to the top of the mountain, not realizing what the hell they were running so fast for.
I realize because
it's not that great after all.
It's funny when we go back on this, roll the tape again, whatever you edited out, which I was most of it. I know how we got on this topic. I know how I got on this topic, and I didn't make the connection originally, but we were talking about the Confederate flag at the base of the Stone Mountain. And I just can't for the life of me figure out why it's still there, because it's just an awful, it's an awful oppressive symbol of a terrible time for Georgia. I think a good part of the population will want to remove it, and someday it will be removed. But there are non-racist. This is the point I want to make. I think there are people who are non-racist who would want the flags removed, but with a heavy heart. And what that heavy heart is, they could not explain logically.
We don't. You and I just don't agree on what it means to be non-racist. I think that's fine, but we don't. I think that I hear a million black people. I hear a million black people in my ears yelling, "You can't call yourself non-racist and have a sense of sadness about that flag," because when they see that flag, they see terror. That's what they see. So having a sadness about that flag means you're not really non-racist. No, by the way, it's the least you can do to be non-racist is to want that flag down and to feel good when it hits the ground. That's literally the least you can do.
No, I agree with you normatively. I was just describing something.
Yeah,
I'm describing. But I do. Hold on. I do think though. So the answer to the quest that I'm on, that I started on your show, before your show, but articulated on your show, and I've been on ever since, really, is there a place where pride in Southern heritage is not racist? And the answer may be no. I mean, I'm not arguing. The answer to that question may very well be no, that if you have pride in the South, you're a racist. But something tells me that's not true.
Jesus, if it's about the cuisine, the music, the influence of French culture, if it's about the weather, seriously, that's Southern. I get that, but that's fine. If your pride is in jazz, but people don't talk generally about Southern heritage when they're talking about that. And if they do, they're talking specifically about those specific arts, cultures, industries, fishing, shrimping, whatever. I keep thinking about only Louisiana, but farming, certain things. I mean, there's a lot of things to be, have pride in.
I think it's more complicated. I think it's more complicated. I'm telling you, I think it's.
But you're describing a person that has a certain sense of empathy or sadness when a Confederate flag hits the ground, and I don't know that person.
No, they wouldn't. No,
I mean, I'm sure that person exists, but I'm saying,
let me retract that. I think most of the people, certainly all the people I hang out with, including Republicans, conservatives, today, I think, would say take the flag down. So they wouldn't.
But I feel like you're not.
But then Pete, people have conflicting feelings about stuff.
They do. But Eric, on my entire career, and yours as well. I'm not saying in any way you don't get but I feel like there's a real clear-cut definition these days of race and racism, and black folks have had it, done. And to call yourself a Republican and conservative today, listen, I'm going to tell you something real quick that you taught me, and I've been using this argument. You didn't quite make it this way, but you taught me all about this. And I want to tell you, this is the threshold for being racist in 2021. This is my threshold. Where are you in the Voting Rights Act?
Yeah.
Where are you on Dr. Martin Luther King and John Lewis's signature accomplishment? Where are you on that? Are you for what they accomplished legally? The laws that they got passed. Are you for them? If you are for them, then you have to vote for the people who will vote to restore them. There are no Republicans, as far as I know, who are going to vote for restoring the Voting Rights Act gutted by the conservative Supreme Court, all of which you taught me about. That's your threshold. Now, they might not understand it. I think most of them don't, but it's what I ask people. You're a Republican? Where are you on the Voting Rights Act? Because if you're not for restoring the Voting Rights Act, then you by your vote, you are racist. You're denying the vote to blacks. So you can't really be a non-racist if you don't support their right to vote, in my opinion. It's a very easy threshold.
But let's be clear what you're saying there. I'm not arguing, but I want to be, and I'm sure we've gone way too long, but I want to be clear what you're saying. I think what you're saying is if you vote for a Republican member of Congress, you're basically a racist.
You don't know it, but you're voting for it. You are voting. It's a semantics. It's semantics. People don't know that they are voting for a racist policy. When you tell them, when you spell it out, that the Republicans actively they stripped the Voting Rights Act.
Yep.
Democrats want to restore it. And by the way, because you can be a Republican and support Republicans if you support Republicans in Congress who will vote for, and the Democrats are about to bring it up. The John Lewis.
There weren't any.
No, I don't know. I'm saying I'm giving a caveat here. You can support Republicans, but only if those Republicans support black people's right to vote. It's so fucking fundamental. It's the right to vote. It's what King and Lewis and so many others fought and died for.
I agree. You sound like me. That's kind of sad.
Well, you've radicalized me.
No, I didn't mean the merits. I meant the tone.
Oh, well, I think it's fine.
The Supreme Court is not a court.
Passion. It's animation. We're having a public conversation.
Why won't anybody listen to me? The Supreme Court is not a court. I swear to God.
All right.
I don't know. I think a lot of the issues we talked about tonight are complicated and emotional. But we had a long conversation about race without any blacks. So I think that was an important thing to mention. I'm trying to present the point of view I hear from black folks all the time. But yeah, and I agree with it. I'm just trying to figure out why it's not more widespread. That's all. Anyway, this was fun, my friend. Thank you. It was great, except for every time that you broke in, like, I don't know if anybody would want to hear this. Of course they do. They love you. I don't know. They love the legal eagle. And this was a wide-ranging conversation. We'll see the reaction. I guarantee what the reaction is going to be. And there's going to be a lot of hate mail for me from Catholics. Just real quick, over the next 10 years, affirmative action, abortion, campaign finance reform, guns, and agency regulation, the Supreme Court's going to be terrible, be sad, just to maintain my reputation. Well, Dr. Gloom and Doom strikes again, ends with be sad. I don't know if you can be any more direct than that. I'm just going to have to counter it and say, be happy, there's other things in life. I agree.
Only need to worry about climate change anyway. I kid the people who are marginalized. All right.
You, by the way, converted me. I've never been a climate change denier. Obviously.
It's as close as I get to faith and religion.
But you did convert me from a passive to aggressive climate change person.
Wanting to be a better person is also a better human. In my mind, is also
I'm now much greener.
Is wanting to be a more sustainable person. Doesn't mean I am, but it's always in my head. It's like opening the door for somebody to me, or whatever. It's like being polite. Is this thing that I am doing sustainable? That's how a lot of people in my, I think, world or milieu think.
Right.
And it is a kind of a almost religious in a way, or spiritual in a way that you're cognizant of and mindful of your consumption. And I think of it mostly on Sundays when it's recycling and I'm crushing 5,000 cardboard boxes that accompanied like one item to my home from China.
If anybody is listening to this, Bill,
they are. I'm telling you, why do you keep saying them?
Time, because you have not acknowledged it. You have changed me. You and Lynn both have changed me a lot on the climate change issue. I'm giving you credit for that. I want you to hear that. Thank you.
I'm glad. Well, I'm sure your daughters had something to do with it too.
That's not their issue yet.
It's not their issue, but if you're any kind of parent, you don't want to watch them.
They're aware of it and stuff, but they're so
but you want to make the world a better place for your kids in every way.
Yes.
And
I'm just saying my daughters they're 12, they're 13 and 12. Trump has occupied most of their life for the last 4 years. That's what they. You
want to know the argument that you made that made me the most angry in my life? And we'll pick it up next time.
Not if it's about Sarah Palin.
When you screamed while we were all in the car that cyclists should not be allowed to use roads.
Oh, I still believe that.
I was following two cyclists today, and I was like, these guys are killing me right now. I was late. I was so mad because I had to stay behind them. But at no point did I think they didn't have the right to be there. You are
they do not have the right to be there.
Next time, we'll debate the merits of cyclists' access to roadways. On next Stand Up with Eric Segall.
None. That's the answer.
All right, and that is the conversation for today. Those of you who listen to the whole thing, I feel so much closer to you. I don't know what you think about me after that, but I'd love to talk with you about the issues that we just discussed. If I got it wrong, I'd love to hear from you. I always want to hear your arguments, criticisms of my take on things, much less my presentation. So thank you very much for spending almost 2 hours with Eric and I. I greatly appreciate it. You guys are awesome. And if you're not supporting the podcast with a subscription, please do. Go sign up at patreon.com/Pete Dominic or click on the paid subscription link in the show notes. Hope to see those of you who are on Thursday night at 8 p.m. Thursday nights, 8 p.m. It's the Stand Up Happy Hour Hangout. Taking it a little easier this week, spending a lot of time working on other projects, including hopefully a live show to come sometime this next year that I would be doing regularly, weekly as well. Lots to do, enjoying doing it, can't do it without your support. So thank you very much. I'll see you on the Discord platform, which is always up and always on. People in that chat room on Discord, if you're a subscriber, you get that access as well. I'll talk to you tomorrow. You're not alone. I love you. Goodbye. Take it away, John Carroll.
Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you gotta stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep things right. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll be change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, to make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up, got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up, people got the power. Stand up. Come on, 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 stand up.
Sir, I'm up here following my dream. If you could shut down your fucking Harley, that'd be perfect. It's my first time. You wait till the headliner gets up. You can go fuck yourself. If he comes over here, who's got my back? Because I can't fight. Okay. You guys will turn on me in about 5 minutes like, I wish that Harley guy would come back. Holy shit, the word out. What a fucking asshole. Are you serious? Do you know who I am? Who